Trevor Moawad is the CEO of Limitless Minds, who was named the sports world's best brain trainer by Sports Illustrated. He went from growing up in Washington State, being a star athlete while in college, to working with 11 #1 NFL draft picks and becoming a renowned mental conditioning expert who's advising some of the world's most elite performers. Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Top 10, I got a top 10. Got my motivation high for my top 10. Gotta learn from the wise women and men. All my life, like 9 for my top 10, top 10, 9. This one's for my top 10.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person that you know, but you also know that you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Trevor Moawad, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Okay, let's kick it off with rule number 1. Don't verbalize negativity.
Well, if somebody says something out loud, it's 10 times more powerful than if they think it. And then as we started to study the data, particularly data that was just reinforced by Christine Porath from Georgetown and Harvard, that negativity is a multiple of 4 to 7 times more powerful than positivity. So think about that. If I say something out loud, it's 10x. If it's negative, it's 4 to 7 times more powerful. So when I say negative things out loud, it's 40 to 70 times more likely that that will happen or cause a result that won't be good for me than if I just didn't say anything. So as we were going into our second year at Alabama, and we were going into our first year at Florida State, and we were ultimately going into our second year at the University of Georgia, we made a bet. What if we could just get our players to not say stupid things out loud? What if we could just do that? Not teach any element of positive thinking, but eliminate conversations about the heat, complaining about coaches, complaining about circumstances, complaining about situations, verbalizing negativity. But we weren't going to lie to them and say, hey, be positive. We just taught them the data. And then what we did was some of the things that you noticed in the book, the stories in and around negativity are incredible.
Tell us some. Bill Buckner was one that took my breath away.
So Billy Buckner, who just passed away recently, was an incredible, an 8-time Gold Glove, a great baseball player for the Boston Red Sox. Well, he made a mistake in sports that would be one of the biggest sport bloopers in history. And in 1986, he let the game-winning run score on a ground ball through his legs that ultimately would give the Mets the World Series. Mm-hmm. Now, I was just watching an ESPN E60 Jeremy Schaap story, and I saw an interview that was done in 1990, that resurfaced in 1995, where Buckner was interviewed 12 days before the World Series. And he said, the dreams are to win the World Series, and the nightmare would be for me to let the game-winning run score on a ground ball through my legs. And then ultimately that's exactly what would happen. Now, by saying that out loud, what did he do? He didn't make it happen, but he increased the probability. And this is what I want people to understand. Your internal thoughts are all over the place.
I want to push on that.
Yeah.
Do you think that he makes it more likely because it's going to subtly influence his behavior, or because you're talking to some magical deity that then says, well, you said it, and so I'm going to make it happen? I
think that what he did is a subconscious plant. By verbalizing it and knowing that it's 10 times more powerful, he's planting it in his subconscious. He doesn't want it to happen, but it becomes something that's ultimately on his mind, and he gave it more power by verbalizing it.
Rule number 2, aim high.
People who become average because they do average people things. I think people who become successful do successful people things, and people who struggle do struggle people things. And so what happens if I'm a struggle person and I keep doing that? Well, I know the outcome. I would rather aim high and miss than aim low and hit, and aiming low is not helping. So focus more on a behavior.
Rule number 3, sustain great habits.
My dad used to always say, when you form a habit, that habit forms you, good or bad. And really the best people in the world are a collection of great habits. And I think we've seen with athletes like Tiger Woods, if you get away from those habits, no matter what your aptitude is, you're going to be average or below average. So with Russ, every year it's about just sustaining great habits. He understands that he doesn't need to be sick to get better. He's won more games than anybody in the history of pro football in his first 4 years. And every offseason, 2 years ago it was down in San Diego, this year it was in LA. It's just about where should we be eating, training, who are the best people to be around, and as good as we are, how do we get better? And that's kind of the support we do. It's not, there's nothing broken, everything's about continuous improvement.
Right.
Rule number 4, adjust your behavior.
So we both grew up in Tacoma, and there used to be a thing called Toastmasters. I don't know if you remember Toastmasters, but Toastmasters was a local, regional, and a national speaking group for anybody that wanted to get better at speaking. Well, my dad had gone to a Toastmasters early on and heard one of the most successful magazine entrepreneurs in the world speak. He comes back and tells me, I just had a chance to hear one of the most successful magazine entrepreneurs in the world speak. And he said, when are you taking your SAT? I said, I'm taking it next year. He said, well, this guy was failing out of high school. He was struggling. He was raised by a single mom in the Midwest, but he promised his mother he would take a test called the SAT. So he takes the SAT in May, his junior year, doesn't expect anything, gets his score back in June. Now the SAT, which I don't know how many your population know, but it's a standardized test with a math part and a verbal part. Both are scored out of 800 points. Well, this guy takes it, he's bombing, he's failing out of school, he doesn't expect anything as he's telling the story at Toastmasters. Well, he gets a 1480 out of 1600. So he's stunned, right? That would be for the smart people that listen to your podcast.
Insane, yeah.
Right, cognitive dissonance, right?
I got a 900 on my SATs just to give people a framework.
Right, and I got a
990, excuse me.
And I got a 1010, right? I was just, hey, 4 digits, it was a miracle, right? But it's a hard test, and it's a variety of different things. So he gets the score, and his mother, doing what any mother would do, knowing her kid, says, did you cheat? Right? She knows her son. And he says, I swear to God, I tried to cheat, but the way the numbers were and the scantrons and the bubbles, you couldn't cheat. So she says, you mean to tell me you really got that score? He said, yeah, I got the score. So he's stunned, Tom. So as my dad's telling me the story, I'm like, okay. So he says, all right. So what he decides is, because he realizes he's smart and he's going into his senior year, he says, I'm going to go to class. Now he starts to go to class. He doesn't hang out with who he did when he didn't go to class. All right? Teachers see him in class and they said, hey, maybe Franklin Pierce, maybe we missed the boat on this kid. So they start to treat him differently. Well, as the guy would tell the story, he graduates, goes to a community college, goes on to Wichita State, goes on to the Ivy League, and becomes this massively successful magazine entrepreneur. So I said, okay, well, the guy was always smart. He just needed a standardized test to unlock it. My dad said, no, that's not the story, and this is what I want you to understand. He said, 12 years after all this guy's success, he gets a letter in the mail from Princeton, New Jersey. Doesn't think anything about it. The next day, his wife says, you're going to open it. He opens it. True story, turns out the SAT board will periodically review their test-taking procedures and the policies. The year he took the test, he was one of 13 people sent the wrong SAT score. His actual score was a 740 out of 1,600. And he said, people think my whole life changed when I got the 1480. But what happened? My whole life changed when I started acting like a 1480. And what does a 1480 do? He goes to class. Well, this is one of the first stories I would share when I had my opportunity at Alabama or Florida State or Georgia. So A, your language is powerful, but number 2, your behavior is way ahead of your success. And so many people let their feelings dictate what they do as opposed to throw your behavior out there. Russell Wilson's 5'10". He shouldn't be playing pro football, but he behaves like the best quarterback in the country, and he's done that since before he was at that level, and then his feelings and emotions and his skill caught up to that behavior. I think the lesson my dad was trying to teach me ultimately was, in addition to my language, what I do, not how I feel about my past, is going to determine who I am in the future.
Also, if you want to have unstoppable confidence and motivation, check out my 254 series. They're free. The links to join are in the description below.
If you didn't give a shit what anybody else thought, what's the thing you would love to be doing with your life?
It is an ideal to which you will attempt to build and advance that ideal through your company with your product. You'll never achieve the ideal, but you'll die trying. And this is what gives our work meaning.
When I was selling copiers door to door, I had a very clear vision of what my life was going to be like.
Rule number 5, accept your reality.
So in 09, probably through 014, I was studying non-negativity. And the best information I could find out about non-negativity was children's books. And the elimination of negativity And, there was Taoism and some other things. But after my last season at Alabama, Kirby Smart, who's the same age as me, got the head coach of Georgia. So it'd be like being at Google and going to another company that's not quite Google.
Yeah.
But getting a chance to be the CEO, and then me leaving Google with a good job to go to him. And I told him, I said, hey, I want to teach it a little bit different. And I want to call some things a little bit different than we've done in the past. Are you cool with that? And he said, yeah. And so we really started forming at that point this idea of, well, negative thinking works negative and positive thinking, it struggles. So let's think of it as a car. If I'm going backwards, I can't go to forwards all at once. I got to go to the middle, and that middle ground is neutral. So the idea of being neutral is ultimately the acceptance of the past as real. And that's where positive thinkers and positive coaches, everybody up. And because they want you to pretend that an outcome that you are currently facing or have faced recently, or you haven't been able to get through, if it's a bad one, but let's be honest, the bad ones are lasting a lot longer in your mind than the good ones. That just sucks. That's how we're wired. It's just the truth. So they want you, I went through a divorce. I talked about it in the book. That was not my choice. I still love her. She's amazing. We're great friends. But there was a lot of people that said, think of all the people now you get to meet. Well, I got married to not meet anybody. I mean, you had your high school sweetheart. I mean, different people have different things, but different people have, I met mine, like love at first sight, airport, all these different things. Well, now it's over. So I had to approach it like, this is real. But I also knew that if I lingered and talked a lot about it, that the negativity would bleed into my future behaviors. So the idea of neutral is, we played a bad half. We had a really bad quarter. We're facing some serious shit right now in our world. I just lost the love of my life. I'm facing this health challenge. I'm just not performing as well as I want. Whatever it is, that's real. But while the past is real, it's not predictive. What you do next is what determines your future, not how you feel.
Guys, what he's saying, I just want to jump in, is when you got a corner who runs a 4.6 40 and he's covering a dude who runs a 4.3, and you keep telling that dude you can run with this guy, he knows he can't. Right? So there's got to be a neutral thinking and a behavior adjustment. I want to make sure they understand.
Right. We film everything. So there's no bullshit.
It doesn't lie.
There's no bullshit. And we got a scoreboard.
Can you give me an example of a neutral statement?
I'll give you just a great one from Apollo 13. So you're 205,000 miles away from Earth, and your secondary ship that's going to land on the moon, or one of them, explodes. So a lot of things are difficult to be positive about at that point. But negative thinking isn't going to work either. So the positive thing might be for Jim, Lovell to tell Buzz Aldrin and Fred Hayes, hey man, just stay with me. We're going to get home. We are finding a way to get home. We are going to get there. And basically what his thing is, all right, what just happened? We had a main bus valve break. Can we still land on the moon? So can we still land on the moon is the ultimate neutral statement. It's not positive. It's not negative. Can we land? No. All right. Okay. We can't land. Can we still, do these two scenarios? No. Can we still orbit the Earth or orbit the moon in this thing? No. All right. So this is our reality. This ship's not going to work. Can we get to the limb, orbit, and circle back? Yes. How would we do that? Okay, we get there. It doesn't have enough oxygen for all of us. So we're going to have a carbon monoxide issue. And every step, and anybody can go on YouTube and watch the Apollo 13 press conference. It's 1 hour and 26 minutes. It's available for everybody, the real one. And the whole thing is, this is how we did it. And then ultimately what he said is, we just had to find a way to keep going. And so, but I think a neutral statement is, through adversity. I take setbacks as temporary. I bounce back quickly.
Rule number 6, model success.
I think successful people do what unsuccessful people don't like to do. And first of all, whatever we do, and from a business perspective, I need to understand what it is that people in my field do to succeed. So a lot of it is not being ignorant relative to the things that it's going to take. So in business, it might be building a pipeline and my marketing strategy. I think in health, the exercising platform. But what specifically can I do to get to that next level?
Rule number 7, listen to your inner voice.
Last year I had a lot of trouble with keeping myself calm in like stressful situations because most of our games were pretty close. So what is something I can do like right then and there to calm myself down so I can dial in?
Do you ever find, like, over the course of a day, do you ever find yourself talking to yourself?
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes? Okay. Whatever you're saying to yourself immediately creates a picture, and that picture affects how you feel. And how you feel has a lot to do with how well you play. Advertising is billions of dollars because it works. Inside, you advertise to Jameson all the time, okay? And your advertising is 10 times more powerful than a television commercial's advertising, or a coach, or a parent, or anybody. You are really selling yourself on what's gonna happen. And you can only think about one thing. What are you not gonna be thinking about?
Anything else?
Anything else, the crowd, my anxiety, all those things. So broadly speaking, just I want you to start listening to that inner voice, okay? And recognizing who controls that inner voice. Who does? For you.
Myself.
You, and it needs to be powerful, it needs to be targeted.
Rule number 8, don't rely on positive thinking.
What I learned ultimately, my dad was the president of the National Association for Self-Esteem. Most people probably don't even know there is that. And he was one of the first authors of Chicken Soup for the Soul. So for anybody that's probably above 35, that they would know that. But the power of positive thinking never resonated with me. And when I was young and I was 18 years old and I'd drop out of college and I was diagnosed with an initial diagnosis of cancer, and it turned out to be shingles and a number of other things, I did start to understand quickly that, well, I don't know if positive thinking works all the time and that the data is anecdotal. I do know that negative thinking does work, and it works negatively. And one of the things is I would start at Alabama and I would start with the Jacksonville Jaguars and I would start with the Miami Dolphins. I started to realize, and even looking back to a young age, that nobody wants to be told to be positive. That positive thinking is probably the number one reason this industry has not grown in my 44 years of living. Positive thinking in many cases repulses people. You're telling me to be positive and I'm going through a divorce. You're telling me to be positive and I threw 3 interceptions. You're telling me to be positive and I got to deal with this president. You're telling me to be positive and I got this current situation. You're telling me to be positive and I got this health situation.
Rule number 9, create your value proposition.
Anybody that understands any type of business, in order to develop relationships with clients, you've got to create your value proposition. And I don't care what you do. When I was a school teacher, obviously, if you're running a world financial company, if you're, no matter what you're doing. So how I would ultimately evolve the education and teaching, doesn't mean that core principles that have been around, since Tacitus and Aristotle and obviously Abraham Lincoln and Norman Vincent Peale and Maxwell Maltz and obviously those have stood the test of time. So much of what we'll get to came out of an adaptation to a very unique population that will never listen to a podcast, will never seek self-help, is not going to Gary Vee, is not, it's just, they're not doing that. So but how I was raised, in the mid 70s, I was born. My dad, Bob Moawad, was a high school teacher and coach in Washington State. So ultimately, my whole life, I was raised by, a peak performance educator, motivational architect, things, but really well-developed systems for the business world. Yeah. So it was, every night at dinner, I got a seminar related to the core principles in and around peak performance.
And rule number 10, the last one before a very special bonus clip, is discipline your mind.
The mind is a powerful tool. And one of the things you'll see in the athletic world is when you make a big mistake or something goes wrong or it's a big loss, we would call it catastrophizing. So that might be this is happening and you immediately go 5 or 6 steps down the line rather than keeping your mind the discipline of this is what's happening right now and how do I deal with what's at hand. So I think nobody really knows how this will play out. I'm not an expert in politics or the financial markets or things from that, but I do have friends that work in the industry, and I think the concepts of how we think and the discipline of our mind and the things that affect us and the way we talk to ourselves, they're universal.
Right.
So it's like gravity affects everybody, whether you believe in it or not.
Now I've got a special bonus clip from Trevor on how to look at adversity as a challenger that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the question of the day. I want to know, where do you need to listen to your inner voice? What is it telling you? Let me know. Put it down in the comments below. And if you made it this far in the video, you're still here watching, give me a hashtag believe down in the comments below. I want to celebrate you. We don't just watch videos here, we do something about it. So give me that believe in the comments below too.
You know what a Navy SEAL is?
Yes.
They talk about whenever they're facing adversity, instead of feeling threatened, like, oh my God, we could lose, they feel challenged. Like, this is a challenge. I'm challenged right now, as opposed to being threatened. When you're threatened, oh my God, I'm scared. When you're challenged, you're like, okay, you're challenging me, I'm gonna find a way to rise up. So I think that we can do that in all parts of our life.
If you want to see the top 10 I did on Mel Robbins, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
The mistakes are where all the learning is. And actually, the mistakes and the imperfect stuff, that's where the gold is, everybody. And so as you're sitting there